Welcome to ConciergeQ Conversations with Chantal Westerman.
Hello, I'm Chantal Westerman, and welcome to ConciergeQ, the online travel magazine where you'll find the best travel information and all you want to know about wherever you're going. And one of the ways we do that is right here with ConciergeQ Conversations. ConciergeQ Conversations are what we like to think of as intimate travel portraits with interesting people from all over the world. We like to think of them as our local travel experts who are in the know. So please remember you can always follow along with us at ConciergeQ.com. Today we're talking to someone actually I've wanted to talk to for a long time, so I really feel pleased and privileged and proud to be talking to Charles Brandt, the former Chief Deputy Attorney General of Delaware and trial attorney turned true crime writer who enjoys splitting his time between Delaware and right here in Sun Valley, Idaho with his lovely wife, Nancy. He's the author of several noted books, including Donnie Brasco, Unfinished Business, The Right to Remain Silent, and the New York Times true crime bestseller, I Heard You Paint Houses, which is the story of Frank the Irishman, Sheeran, and closing the case on Jimmy Hoffa. Now, Charlie's works reveal the activities of the nation's most notorious crime families, and I'm talking about the real ones. Charlie, as he likes to be called, gained the trust and respect of Frank the Irishman Sheeran, who confessed to him about all his mob hits. I Heard You Paint Houses is the result of 5 years, if you can imagine, of recorded interviews with Sheeran. And The Irishman, which is the movie that they're making of that book, is currently being made into a Martin Scorsese major motion picture starring who else? Of course, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, and Joe Pesci. I think a lot of people are going to be waiting for that movie. Brandt's most recent release, We're Going to Win This Thing, you probably saw it a couple of weeks ago on 60 Minutes. I saw it. It was a great piece. It's a book he co-authored with former FBI agent and key player in the New York mafia wars, Lynn DeVecchio. And with that, I say, Charlie, I'm so happy to meet you.
Well, I'm so happy to be here and answer your questions.
I shouldn't even say I'm so happy to meet you because, I mean, we both live in Sun Valley. I've seen you around and I've liked you for a long time, but to get to talk to you is just terrific for me and for all of us at ConciergeQ.
Likewise.
So, I'm one of those people who comes home at night. This is true confessions, all right? I mean, I get in front of you, and it's true confessions.
I take confessions.
I watch Law and Order, CSI, The First 48, and I have so many people, so many friends who love to watch crime on television. Short story, I had a girlfriend the other day say to me, "Oh, I've had such a stressful day. I've got to go home and watch crime." I said, "If you've had a stressful day, why are you going to watch crime?" And she said, "I find it oddly soothing." What is it about America's obsession with watching crime?
Well, I think we have to take out the word Americas and go back to right from the Bible. Cain killed Abel. I mean, we, as a human species, I think, we've been interested in crime. Mm-hmm. It's got so many aspects to it: psychological, greed. And it puts ordinary people, into another world where they can forget their stress and be in a world that's almost a fantasy world. Mm-hmm. And I experienced it during those 5 years with Frank Sheeran. I experienced the mafia aspect of it. I had been a prosecutor of ordinary crimes, the state crimes, the murders and that sort of thing. And I was a homicide investigator. And I really didn't know much about the mafia other than what I'd read. And here I was traveling with a high-ranking member of the Russell Buffalino crime family and meeting people. You know, I'd be sitting in a room with Frank and 8 guys named Rocco.
You know, that's one of the things that I loved about the book is when you say Russell Buffalino. You know, it's a name, honestly, Charlie, that people would try to make up to put into a movie or a story. Yeah. And it's the real deal. There really is.
Deal. His real name was Rosario.
Well, even better, Rosario Buffalino. I mean, really.
Yeah. Born in Sicily. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned earlier that there's a movie going to be made, and I told a story to Martin Scorsese about Buffalino wearing a hat that had the Italian word padrone on it. Mm-hmm. And I said, isn't that amazing that he would set himself up over here as a padrone, but my Italian family left Italy to get away from the padrone because the men could only work for the for the padrone in the fields. The women could only work in the house for the madam, and that was their life. But when they came to America, they had opportunities. And this guy, Russell Buffalino, set himself up over here as a padrone. And a
big one.
And a big one, yeah, the biggest.
Here's what I'd like to know. When you set up that meeting with Marty Scorsese and Bobby De Niro, they say, okay, we've got 20 minutes, go. How long was the meeting?
Well,
how long was it supposed to be, I should say?
I didn't set it up. No. I'm out here in Sun Valley, Idaho, doing all the healthy things. This place should be called Healthy Valley. And I get a call from Paramount on a Tuesday, and they want me to fly on Friday to New York and meet with Scorsese, De Niro, and the great screenwriter Steve Zalian, who won an Oscar for Schindler's List and last wrote American Gangster. And I said, look, it's Tuesday. You want me to fly out on Friday? I've got a hike I had planned. Are you kidding me? This is Sun Valley. So, of course, I ran to the airport. And it was supposed to last an hour, this meeting. Yeah. I had reserved an hour, and it lasted 4 hours. It was just fabulous. Interestingly, I grew up in New York City, Italian. And my father was American, but we grew up with the Italian side of the family. His parents had died before I was born. And so did they. So I was graduate of high school in 1959 in New York. Scorsese, 1960. De Niro, 1961. We're, contemporaries. And we had a lot in common apart from the book and their interest in Frank Sheeran. It was really a meeting to try to learn more than the book revealed, because I had a lot of other anecdotes that didn't make it into the final cut of the book, and they were copying them down.
What a cool thing for you to fly from Idaho, Charlie, to sit down with Bobby De Niro, Martin Scorsese, Steve Zalian, and all of a sudden, you're one of the good guys. You are.
Well,
really?
I can tell you I was very impressed with them. I grew up when there was no such thing as a John Ford movie. It was John Wayne's movie, or whoever was the star of it, Maureen O'Hara.
Yeah.
But I never really cared about directors. I don't know. It's something that came up after my era. And boy, I've changed my tune on that one. They are so smart. Their questions so intuitive. They're artists, And people say to me, "How do you feel like having turned your book over and now you have nothing to say about it?" Well, what am I going to say to Michelangelo? A little more red in the robe?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just thrilled that these tremendous people have this book of mine.
It's going to be fabulous. But you'll be a consultant. You'll be on the movie.
Well, I hope so. I haven't been asked yet, but I hope so.
Oh, I bet you are. One thing I've always wondered, you being a homicide detective and then a prosecutor, do you ever have those moments of wanting to switch? Because so often people who are defenders of the criminals become prosecutors themselves.
Well, actually, I did switch. I was... when I left the Attorney General's office of Delaware, and that's the office that investigates and prosecutes crime, I opened my law practice with the intent of becoming a medical malpractice plaintiff's attorney. But if you get a case, it'll be 5 years before you ever get to trial on it. And in the meantime, you need to earn a living. And because I had this reputation as a trial lawyer, I got a lot of referrals. And so for a while, I was defending the murderers of Delaware as part of my law practice.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So do you get a point where you say, I can't do this anymore, these are the bad guys?
Well, I never did, because there are two ways of handling a criminal defense work. One is that you don't want to know the truth because you want to be able to put your defendant on the stand or whatever the case is. And the other theory, and that's the theory of the great criminal lawyer Henry Rothblatt, who basically invented F. Lee Bailey. He was F. Lee Bailey's mentor. And Henry Rothblatt believed in knowing the truth is the best way to defend. And I found that when you get the confession from the criminal lawyer client, I can't repeat his confession to me, but the facts are often so different from what the prosecution thinks they are these days, because the prosecution these days doesn't get the opportunity to interview the defendant the way they did when I was a young man. They thought nothing of interviewing people. Today, the Supreme Court rules prohibit that. So we have like Casey Anthony. You wait to trial to find out what the defense is going to be.
Yeah.
In the old days, they would have sat her down in a room, sat her mother down in another room, sat her father down in another room, sat her brother down in another room, and there would have been no wiggle room by the time she was prosecuted.
It's funny you should bring her up because we've asked our viewers and our listeners and our people on ConciergeQ what they would want to ask you, and we had so many people write in and say, "What do you think of the verdict?"
Sweet.
A lot of people, yeah, you've got a lot of fans, my friend. So, what do you think of the verdict? That was the number one question they wanted to know.
That particular trial, I'm sorry to say, I didn't follow it. I was busy with other things, but I did watch every second of the O.J. Simpson trial.
Oh yeah,
and what was what was missing was an opportunity to question him, and the perfect time to question him would have been after the Bronco chase.
When Judith Regan interviewed him, right?
She interviewed him many years later for a book, but when he came out of the Bronco...
Oh, yes.
He was being chased by the police. He was trying to escape. He had a gun that he was putting in his mouth. Mm-hmm. He had a wig, he had a passport, and he had $10,000 in cash. And he was trying to get away. He was followed in the Bronco, and America watched that famous Bronco chase, the white Bronco.
Yeah, I never left my television.
And when he stepped out of that Bronco was the time he needed to be questioned. He was the most vulnerable. He was the most scared. My Italian grandmother would have said to him, "Oh, Jay, what that Jezebel do to you?" And he would have started crying and spilled his guts out. But they weren't allowed to ask him a single question under the Supreme Court rules. And so...
You mean the Miranda rule?
Well, that and the subsequent rulings that followed up on Miranda and fine-tuned it.
Right.
And so they couldn't ask him, how was the ride, O.J.? They couldn't say anything to him.
Well, your book, The Right to Remain Silent, is all about that.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. I know my stuff because I read that book because I loved it.
Thank you.
I loved it.
It was fiction, but it was based on cases that I cracked.
Absolutely.
As an interrogator.
Absolutely. The Patriot Act really slowly and quite quietly, I should say, right behind the scenes has been renewed for a couple of more years. Does that strengthen the Miranda rule, I wonder?
Not really. It doesn't. It strengthen it in a way you mean make it harder to get confessions?
Yes.
I don't think so. I think, they'll still be interviewing these people.
No, I certainly hope so.
Yeah, they have a different goal. They not necessarily want to interview them for a confession that they'll use at trial. They want intelligence from them. It's a different world than the average crime. Before
you were famous, before you were Attorney General, before you were all of these things, you worked as a welfare investigator, and you worked in East Harlem.
Yeah.
And I wonder how that informed your life as a writer, as an investigator. What did that bring to your life?
Well, that's a good question. I did that for 2 years, and I will say I had a lot of fun there. And at the time, the Harlem riot occurred, but there was no riot in what is generally known as Spanish Harlem, East Harlem. And the people were mostly Puerto Ricans, but there was one little section of Italian mafia that stayed in East Harlem. And they reminded me of my Italian family. And I really enjoyed it. The investigation part is really a minor aspect of it. You just make sure that they're still eligible for welfare, and you make sure that their kids are getting vaccinated and that they know what's available to them at Metropolitan Hospital, that sort of thing.
But it must have brought to your life, too, a sort of fearlessness about being in some place like East Harlem and getting to know the psychology of people.
Hey, fearlessness. I thought I told you I was Italian. We're not known for fear. I don't know what the rest of the audience thinks.
I forgot, of course. What a foolish question.
That's not one of our biggest things.
It's interesting. What I'm doing is projecting onto you the fear that other people have when they say, he talked to who? He spent time and locked up in a room with who? It does require a fearlessness.
There were moments when people might be afraid in East Harlem when I was working there, but you had to assert yourself and have yourself.
Yeah, people can't see you, but you do have that kind of look of no nonsense. Don't mess with me. Just for people listening to this. Charlie, how careful did you have to be interviewing what can only be considered dangerous people? That's not the word. Let me rephrase the question.
Okay, it's a good word. These people are scary. You do have to be, you don't want to be reckless around them. You have to be respectful, and you have to be careful when you write a book about them, what you say about people that are not involved in your project. In the case of Frank Sheeran, he planned, without my knowledge, that after he finished the final interview, he was going to kill himself. And he did. He just stopped eating. He was in a nursing home. And he died the same day they caught Saddam Hussein. In fact, I heard on the radio that Saddam Hussein was called, and I thought I'd caught, and I wondered what Frank thought about it, and I was going to call him. And he had died. But there was a particular bad guy by the name of Billy D'Elia. And Billy was Russell Buffalino's nephew and very close to Russell. And when Russell died in his 90s, Billy D'Elia took over the crime family. And I was at a birthday party with Frank. And that night, it was Frank's birthday. That night, Frank called me and said, you know what Billy said to me after you left? He said, did you trust that guy? I said, do I trust that guy? Blah, 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 blah. I said, wait a minute. What did the head of the Buffalino crime family have to say about me? Because when they don't trust you, they kill you, And his name is not mentioned in the book. And for good reason,
I was just thinking with good reason, I'm sure.
I can now talk about him because he has since been arrested for money laundering and conspiracy to murder. And he turned state's evidence. He rolled. He's a witness for the FBI now. And so I don't mind using his name. But I certainly was wise enough, at least, to keep his name out of the book.
There had to be moments, too, and I'm sure you've been asked this before, but I want to hear you talk about it, sitting across the table and finding yourself really liking the guy. Finding things in common, finding things that you really enjoyed. Was it Robert Ressler, who is the guy who's the profiler, who wrote a book?
Yeah.
And he said something like, when you look into the abyss, be careful because the abyss looks back in you. And he would interview serial killers, and he would say, God, we like the same things.
Yeah. Well, that was something I noted when I was a prosecutor. The people I was prosecuting with, you would end up kidding around with them as you're in a courtroom, a 9-week trial against 4 black Muslims who they used to have. The black Muslims, people don't realize this, but they had robbery squads back in the 70s and early 70s. And in the course of a robbery, they killed a liquor store clerk, and I was the prosecutor on it. And by that time that trial ended, we were trading barbs. In the beginning, I was threatened. They were going to murder me. But by the time it ended, I'll never forget, I'll tell you a cute anecdote. The ringleader was sitting in a way that I could see him and he could see me easily. We could easily speak in the courtroom. And he turned to me and he said, I understand you're going to give the opening statement. I said, that's right, Sterling. He was Minister Sterling X. Hobbs. He had his own mosque in Jamaica, New York. And a bright fella. He was a writer. In fact, you can Google him. He writes books from jail right now, novels. And Sterling said to me, what makes you think you're going to finish your opening statement?
Oh, my.
And I said, we had a cop sitting next to me, And I said, Sterling, you better hope that nobody comes barging through that back door. And this was the early days before you had metal detectors and all that. And we had open windows in the courtroom, I said, you better hope that a truck doesn't backfire out there, because this guy's not going to do anything to help me. He's just going to put a bullet in your brain immediately and put one in Wilbur's brain, the guy sitting behind him, Wilbur Shabazz Johnson. But that was at the beginning of the trial. By the end of the trial, we're laughing, and that happens. I mean, you're a human being and these are human beings.
Yeah, they are.
And most, from what I've seen, although I never prosecuted a serial killer, but from what I've seen on television, most of them have some kind of deep trauma in childhood, and a lot of times it revolves around their mothers. Mm-hmm. And also today, drugs, unfortunately, enters the picture and takes away their judgment and their ability to control themselves.
Mm-hmm. How many books do you have rolling around your head? Do you ever wake up some mornings and say, man, I just don't have enough time to write all that's rolling around in my head? Yes.
And then with this movie thing, I got the harebrained idea at the age of 69 that maybe I could write a screenplay, So yes, lots of that rolling around the old noggin.
I would like to apply for the job of craft services right now and stand at the craft services table and pass out crackers. If you don't mind, you can put in a good word.
I'm glad you said pass out crackers. I didn't know
the craft services table is the table where there's cheese and peanuts and M&Ms, and you just give it to people sometimes when they want a little energy bolt. It's called craft services.
I think you and my wife will have to fight over that table.
Shall we get on?
She loves to eat.
Oh, she does?
Oh, yeah.
Well, Nancy should do craft services because here's the inside clue to Hollywood. On the inside knowledge, the best craft services have the best food. I mean, they have phenomenal egg salad.
Nancy.
And the little kind of independent silly movies, they have M&Ms and walnuts and Snickers. But I have a feeling on this one you're going to have a great craft services table. So when you pass the craft services table, say, Chantal told me about it.
You bet.
So let's talk a little bit about the Q, the ConciergeQ, which you so graciously filled out. When we asked you what word best reflects the people of Sun Valley, you said...
I hope I said generous.
You did say generous.
Well, what do you know? I have a good memory. How long ago was that?
No.
That was a long time ago that I filled this out.
Yeah, you did, and you said generous. It must mean that you really mean it.
Oh, God, they are. They're very generous people, not just in the valley, not just the things that they donate to and keep alive, like the animal shelter and from the animal shelter to the Sun Valley Pavilion. It couldn't be done without the generosity of people who make this at least a second home, if not their full-time home. And wherever their first home is, they're equally generous, So I've been invited to be one of these speakers for the Los Angeles Library from some. Again, there's a lot of fundraising that goes on.
I think you're right. I would agree that the people of the Wood River Valley, of Sun Valley, are very generous. And I find, having lived here for almost 7 years now, coming in from Los Angeles and New York, that I find them most generous with their service work. People are always volunteering.
Always volunteering, you bet. That's so true.
Isn't that great?
It's Marty.
Where you live. What is the most creative, spiritual, or emotional place in Sun Valley?
Well, I remember what I said for that one. I gave a plug to my dear friends at Chapter 1 Bookstore. I hang out there. I mean, literally. Just yesterday, a fella came in to buy my book. And I was at the other end of the store reading, and Cheryl, the owner, called out, "Charlie, can you come up and sign a book?" And the guy's jaw dropped.
Oh, my goodness, I bet it did.
It was the author sitting there.
Yeah.
To sign a book.
Yeah, eating a sandwich, reading a book. Perfect.
Yeah.
What is by the way, let me go back to this, talk about people who are of service. Cheryl.
Oh, my God, yes.
From Chapter 1
Absolutely. She's the best.
One of our most amazing citizens. I rescue a lot of dogs in the valley, and I always take the dogs up to Chapter 1, and she always cries and always calls 10 people. So
yeah, she's the best.
She is the best. What is your favorite outdoor activity in Sun Valley?
Well, hiking. I don't remember what I said, but it depends. What did I say?
Well, you said Adams Gulch, of course.
Oh, yes, Adams Gulch, you bet.
Adams Gulch offers so much. There's people that go to the sunny side and there's people who go to the shady side.
Yeah.
And to do the loop. I'm a shady side girl.
Okay, I'm on the sunny side.
You go up around the big loop and come back around?
Yeah.
And what kind of dogs do you have?
Well, my dogs are not with me. They're in Delaware. I had my Hannah out here for years, and then she just became too old. So she's back east, and our daughter's taking care of her.
And another one of the services, by the way, for people who come here to visit Sun Valley, and want to hike and catch up with Charlie Brandt, who will be hiking, you can go and pick up a dog on Wednesdays because our shelter has a hiking program. Pick up a buddy. Every Wednesday, you can take a dog with you all through Adams Gulch.
How do you return that dog? That's the problem that scares me. I would love to have that dog on my. But my schedule is so wacky.
Well, you just take the hike, and when you go back to the parking lot, you drop the dog off right there.
Ooh, I'm not that fearless. I'm only half Italian.
He'll talk to
I would be such a wimp. Oh, God, how do you return that dog? You got to keep it.
I know. You're such a good-hearted man. That's why we love you here in Sun Valley. He'll talk to the mafiosa guys, but he can't return the dog. I love it.
Yeah.
What song or type of music best reflects Sun Valley?
Well, obviously, the song It Happened in Sun Valley from the movie Sun Valley Serenade is just full of joy and right on target. But I'm an old-fashioned guy in my music, and I would say the song Stardust, and 90% of your audience never heard of it, even though it's such a beautiful song.
Well, I've heard of it, so I guess we're both old guys. One way or another. What a joy and a pleasure to talk to you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I'm not even going to close the show before I really, really ask you to come back when the movie is up and running and you're back here visiting and you can talk about the movie set and what's happening on I Heard You Paint Houses.
Try and stop me.
Well, they're going to call it The Irishman. What am I talking about?
Well, not necessarily. That's gone a little by the wayside. The title of the book is I Heard You Paint Houses, and they may use that title.
I like
De
that.
Niro was being interviewed by Regis Philbin, and he kept referring to it as I Heard You Paint Houses. And Philbin got upset, saying, wait a minute, I thought it was going to be The Irishman. I'm Irish. And De Niro kind of skirted the issue. The problem is that a movie came out called Kill the Irishman about the mafia, starring Christopher Walken. So,
Who's good in everything he does.
Oh, I love him.
Even in a bad movie.
He's a New Yorker. He's from Astoria, Queens.
Yeah. The title, I Heard You Paint Houses, comes from what? What does that mean?
That's an old-fashioned mafia term. To kill somebody, the paint is the blood that spatters on the floor and the walls. And so it means to kill somebody. Those were the first words that Jimmy Hoffa asked Frank, the Irishman Sheeran, in a job interview over the phone. Sheeran was being promoted by Russell Buffalino to go to work for the Teamsters, to go to work for Jimmy Hoffa. Hoffa had just taken over the Teamsters and needed some people killed. And he said, I heard you paint houses. And Sheeran said on the phone, I do my own carpentry work too, which means he gets rid of the bodies.
He's the cleaner.
Yeah.
Well, if that's not enough to entice everyone listening to this to not only go buy the book and Donnie Brasco and everything else you've written and see the movie, I don't know what is. So
it's better than the movie because the movie doesn't exist yet.
It's in pre-production.
Yeah.
Please remember that you can learn even more about Charlie Brandt and his wonderful insider travel tips for Sun Valley, Idaho on ConciergeQ.com. And be sure to check out other Sun Valley travel cues from acclaimed actress and author Jamie Lee Curtis, Adam West, of course, Batman, Olympic silver medalist and world champion figure skater Linda Fradiani, and of course, me, just to name a few. In addition, you can find out so much more about my great friend here, Charles Brandt, and his wonderful books at HoffaSolved.com. Again, that's HoffaSolved.com because he does know where Jimmy Hoffa is buried. ConciergeQ invites you to discover more great programming at Everyday Opera as well. And with that, I say thanks so much for tuning in to ConciergeQ Conversations with my friend Charlie Brandt, and we'll see you next time.